Hello everyone and welcome back to the Libra Sun podcast. My name is Alisa and today I'm going to be talking about self-development books that are actually worth reading. I feel like nowadays there's like a huge demand for either self-help or self-development books, but so many of them reiterate the same ideas again and again, especially the self-development books. I feel like with self-help, a lot of them are focused on psychology and a lot of them are just different psychological or perhaps different mental approaches to certain things. But self-development books, so many of them focus on the same exact ideas. So, for example, there's this book which is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. And even though it is quite a good self-development book and it does have some great ideas, when I was reading it, I felt like I've seen all of these ideas before for free online, and a lot of them were just reiterations of the same points for me. And I know that there are some people that have read this book that, for example, are not really in the like self-development communities or do not like search for inspirational quotes or like how to do this and how to do that online. So for them, some of those ideas were maybe new and exciting. But I feel like for most people that have ever, watched a video on self-development and perhaps this kind of attitude of not caring too much and how to not be a people pleaser, or who have like maybe read blog posts or something like that. For them, it's not exactly going to be new and exciting. So yeah, what I'm trying to get at is there are a lot of books that, in my opinion, are not exactly worth reading and are not worth buying because they literally talk about the same things. But today, for this episode, I put together 3 self-development books, which, in my opinion, are absolutely worth it. And you should definitely get your hands on them and read them if they interest you, if the kind of idea and the summary that I'm going to give you interests you. So let's get straight into it. So these 3 books, 2 of them focus more on communication and one of them focuses on life in general. And even though some people might not exactly understand why I put it in here, I feel like on top of giving what it's supposed to give and on top of being and delivering its main point, it also delivers much more. But I'm going to talk about that book last. First, I want to start with super popular book that a lot of people probably have heard of, but I definitely think it's actually worth the hype, is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. This book is pretty big. It's pretty complicated at times. Like, it's not a very simple language, for example, like the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck had. This is a much more complicated book. This almost feels, to be honest, whilst you're reading it, like a textbook for like business people, It's like a textbook with a mix of personal stories and personal experience. And I feel like a lot of people know what this book is about. It's the book with a lot of different steps and a few different ways of how to basically resolve your problems in your personal life or in your professional life. And he's obviously a businessman, and a lot of these stories, like the personal accounts and stuff like that in this book, come from his business experience. But I feel like this is such a great book, again, not only for your business, but also for your personal life and for how you approach certain problems and how you approach certain decisions. And I thought that it was really, really good. And also, in my opinion, this is one of those books that even if you're not going to use everything this book has to offer, it's just a very nice thing to read, to just broaden your horizons and to expand on your knowledge and to maybe find something new or perhaps rethink the things that you already do. I think it is a great book. I remember when I was reading it, it was really inspirational. It was quite nice. And what I like about this book in particular, that the way I read it, because I'm going to be honest, my favorite book genres are usually either romance or perhaps fantasy, those kinds of books that engulf you and don't let you go until you finish reading them, and that perhaps transport you into a different world or into a different time, something along those lines. And those kinds of self-help, self-development books, they're not usually my cup of tea. But yeah, so the way I read this book is I read it in mixture with other books, and I read it as a textbook, to be honest. Like I would read a textbook, I would set aside some time, read a certain amount of pages or perhaps a chapter or like a section of the book, and then move on and do my other things. That's why I still have like 10 pages of it left, and I bought it last year because I read it when I feel like reading it, to be honest, when I'm in the mood for that. And I feel like it's quite a good way to read those kinds of books if you feel like self-development books are not exactly your cup of tea, because I definitely understand that position. But at the same time, these are the books that help you in your life and that make it more interesting, so why not? So yeah, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I feel like, is a very helpful book that you will enjoy and that will give you some new tips on how to be a highly effective person. But also there were some certain situations from his personal life that were very interesting to listen to, not even from a perspective of like, oh, how to be a highly effective person, but from a perspective of how to approach problems and how certain things that we view as problems don't actually have to be problems, and they're not actually problems, or they're not as difficult of problems as we thought they were. So I thought that this was a very interesting book, and there are a lot of self-development books that are super hyped up and they're not worth the hype, but I definitely do think that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is worth the hype, even if you're not interested in business or those kinds of stuff. I feel like it's just an interesting book. I mean, he talks about raising his child and the certain approaches and things he took from those like 7 habits and those approaches and put them in practice with his son, which is a completely different view and a completely different lane to business. So no matter who you are, I think it's just a very interesting book to have read and to have, digested. There's, how people say there's like, how there are like books that everyone should read, no matter whether you're into that kind of stuff or not, like whether it is some sort of classics or some sort of psychology connected books. I feel like this is one of those books because it's just so interesting and the ideas in there are pretty useful. So this is about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And now I would like to kind of stay on the lane of communication, but move into something slightly different. And this is personal relationships between men and women. And some people might already know what I'm about to say, but this is a book by John Gray called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, a practical guide for improving communication and getting what you want in your relationship. So I can already tell how some people, based on the name of the book and stuff, are going to be talking about the fact that, it's just dividing the genders, again, reiterating that we are so different and we're not equal and we're not the same. Because I have heard a lot of people who are fighting for equality saying phrases like men are from Mars, women are from Venus is separating and dividing, and it's not really good. And I would agree with that. And I just want to reiterate the idea that I am a feminist and I fight for equality. And I definitely do not believe that men and women are, should not be equal or should not be treated the same. And I don't feel like this book does that. I feel like it's been biologically proven that there are certain inconsistencies between men and women. For example, not inconsistencies, but differences. For example, in the hormones we produce and the amounts of hormones of certain hormones we produce. And obviously those hormones, they affect the way we think or the way we view situations. This is why, people usually say that men, like, statistically are more logical. It's not to say that they're not logical, but they have a mathematical type of thinking, very rational. And it's not to say that women are not logical or rational or whatever. I know so many women who are so logical and rational, way more rational than certain men. But it is to say that there are certain things that kind of tend to happen in one gender over the other. But even then, I don't think this book actually separates us. I think what this book does is says, hey, these are some patterns that happen in men and women, and these are some ways to deal with those patterns if you notice them. What I really liked, because this book was actually in my parents' bookcase, and I was like, I don't know what this is. This is weird, but I was in my psychology phase, so I decided to just pick it up and read it, and it changed the way I view certain things, because there is a reason why guys always say, oh, women are a mystery, like what the hell do they want? And there's the same reason why we say, I don't understand why he's acting this way. Whether it is about your boyfriend, your brother, your father, your just friend who is a guy, whether it is about your friend who's a girl, because trust me, there are some things in there about women and about certain patterns in female behavior that were helpful for me as a female. It's not kind of confined to this thing of, if you're reading it as a female, it's just about how to communicate with men or vice versa. No, it's just about how to communicating with whatever gender. Because what I liked about this book, yet again, is that it's not a book for one gender. A lot of books about relationships and about love are intended and targeted at women, which is kind of sexist and it's a separate topic, but so many of them are directed at women. So many of them are how to be a good girlfriend, how to be a good wife, how to communicate to your boyfriend or whoever well, how to make sure that men understand you and that men, basically it's a book for how to be better for men instead of a book how we can see the differences that we have and communicate based on them and walk kind of around them, or how we can effectively avoid conflict in all situations. And what I liked about that book is that the shade that it threw at women was the same amount of shade it threw at men. If it said something like, yeah, women tend to do this, so you might have to tiptoe around them in that kind of situation to do that. At the same time, it said, well, men do this thing, that might not be exactly normal or that might not be exactly easy to understand or whatever. And so this is their problem, or like not so a problem, but a uniqueness that has to be kind of addressed in a way. And that's what I liked about it, is because this is a book about how to have a good relationship with, it's intended to be how to have a good relationship with the opposite sex, but I think that it also might help you with your own sex. But yeah, it's perfect for both men and women. I would say that if everyone read this book, the communication would be so much better in the workplace, at home, in like friendship groups, everywhere. This book talks and it points a lot about those hormonal things and those hormonal and biological and psychological changes. It doesn't just base itself on, yeah, whatever I think or they think. It kind of bases on the research that has been done biologically and psychologically, and kind of says, well, when your hormones, like when this hormone rises, this is what you need in terms of communication. When this hormone falls, this is what this person tends to do, and this is what they need at that time. And I think that's very, very nice, and I think that's just very good in general. And I've recommended this book to so many of my friends because I truly think that it helped. And as a female, as a woman reading it, a lot of the things that were said about females, because yet again, this book is written by a man, so a lot of people might be like, oh, what does he know about us, But when I was reading it as a female, it was actually, I could relate to a lot of things that were said, and a lot of problems that he talked about, I related to them, and a lot of solutions that he suggested, for example, in this way, for a man that might be reading it who wants to improve communication with his, female partner, for example, a lot of those solutions were very, very great. And even though this book is a bit old-fashioned in the way that it takes the relationship and, the romantic relationship between men and women as a basis, like it takes a heterosexual relationship as the basis of its narrative, I think that a lot of these things, just as much as I learned about how to communicate with my friends who are girls, with like my girlfriends, and recognize certain behavior patterns in them or in myself and be able to communicate better in those situations, just as I learned it this way, I think that people that are homosexual, if you, for example, like girls, if you're a girl and you like girls, you can learn a lot of additional information on that. If you're a guy who like guys, you will learn a lot of additional information. If you are a person that, is coming to a new workplace or work environment or school, and you want to improve your relationship and with the opposite sex, because you have a lot of people of the opposite sex working around you, or if there are perhaps people that you don't exactly understand how to get a better communication with them, I think it's just a very good book. And there are even, John Gray even did TED Talks and stuff. So if you're not sure that you want to jump into the book straight away and get it and, spend money on that, maybe go on YouTube and check out his TED Talk and just see if you vibe with him as a person. I think he's a very nice guy. And the way he talks about it, I think it's clear that he does not see one gender below the other. It's just that he recognizes the differences and he wants both genders to put in the equal amount of work into those relationships, which I actually think is quite good. So Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus is a book that I would recommend to boys, girls, non-binary people, anyone. Because as I said, it focuses heavily on the biological differences and the hormonal differences that cause certain behavioral differences. So that basically means that it's not based on social stereotypes or things that, women are like this or men are like this. It's not based on that. It's based on, hey, when this hormone rises, you are probably going to want to be alone. And for a different person, for example, women, we don't have those certain hormones or we don't have them in that amount. So we're like, hey, why is he acting like this? And this book goes, well, because his testosterone, for example, is high or low or whatever. And so that's why his body and his mind react to it the way they do. So what you can do in this situation when his hormone rises or falls is this and this, right? And so this is going to help you avoid conflict or whatever because of the things that his body or whatever just naturally does. So yeah, I would highly recommend this book, highly recommend it. But now let's move on to the last book that I wanted to talk about. And this is, again, just like the 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People, this book has been very, very kind of trendy, I guess, and it has gotten a lot of hype. And this is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying by Marie Kondo. And the reason I actually put this book in here is not because of tidying, Because yes, this book is very great. It's very interesting to read about the approach, her approach to tidying your space and your world, like around you and stuff, and to kind of it's a new view on things that we own and stuff like that, which I thought was interesting. But the reason I actually put it in here is because of the underlying things and the new points of view on the world that it can give you. So because she's talking about tidying things, like I think everyone knows it, it's you pick up the thing and you ask yourself, does this spark joy or not? And if it doesn't, you get rid of it because you don't need it taking up space in your life. And I feel like that can be applied not only to your things like clothes, books, whatever, but to your life in general. I think it is a very great book to look a little bit deeper and to apply certain tips and advice she gives, not onto materialistic things, for example, but onto certain kind of mental things, and certain intangible things like your job or your school or your relationships with people, your view on different problems and stuff. Like, I think there was this quote, I think it was in Pirates of the Caribbean, but I'm not sure, what it's like, the problem is not the problem, but your view of the problem, or something like that. I think it's a very popular phrase. If you start typing it in on Pinterest, for example, there will be a lot of photos of Jack Sparrow saying this quote, or something like that, or this quote being attributed to Jack Sparrow. But I feel like this book really gives you the kind of view into that and really makes you think, well, perhaps she's right, or perhaps this Jack Sparrow or whoever quote is also right. I thought it was a very interesting experience to read it and kind of look at my life in a bit of a different light, and more so start analyzing it in the way of what am I wasting my time on? What am I doing, and what am I choosing to do? What am I choosing to, who am I choosing to hang out with? What kind of hobbies or things am I choosing to invest in? Because sometimes we just go with the flow, or we just do whatever is easy or whatever is around us and available. But then at the end of the day, it's like, is this really what I want to be doing? Are those people really good for me, or is this really good for me? Is my life doing great? And I know that getting all of those deep stuff out of a book about how to, tidy your home is, for some people, might be a bit of a stretch. But I think her whole philosophy is very interesting, and her whole philosophy is what we should focus on, because it is actually something different, and it is actually very interesting. And maybe whilst tidying your home, Marie Kondo method, you might find that you also want to tidy up your life the same method, like asking yourself, does this thing spark joy? If it doesn't, what can I choose to do instead? If you've been, I don't know, the first thing that came to my mind is if you've been going to dance classes for 5 years and something, and you just do it because of out of habit, right? And maybe you don't want to go to dance classes anymore. Maybe you want to try out tennis. Who knows, right? But when you do it every single day, again and again for multiple years, you don't particularly think about it this way. You're just like, yeah, it's what I do. It's what I do, right? But do you do that because you like that still? Because you might have liked it when you started it, but do you like it still? You know what I mean? And I thought that this was a very interesting book and a very interesting approach. And for me personally, it was very eye-opening, more so in the life area than in the tidying up my home or whatever. So even though I'm not 100% sure how much this book can be considered self-development, I don't know where else you would put it, in which other category. I do think it's self-development, but at the same time, I think that if you look a bit deeper, or if you take the philosophy that she shares and apply it to other things, it's very interesting. And I think Marie Kondo, as I hope I'm saying her name right, The way she just feels like a very nice and a very calming person. If you've ever seen her videos or interviews and her program, she's just so calming, and she has this amazing kind of love for smaller things in life, because one of the things that you have to do when you get rid of things is you thank them for serving you, you thank them for being there with you, but yet you understand that they don't have a place in your life anymore. And I thought this was absolutely fantastic. And yet again, if you apply this philosophy to your real life, it becomes easier to let go of things that are not bringing you joy anymore, because it's not like sometimes it can be very hard to get rid of things because you feel like they're very meaningful and important to you, and so you feel like you're betraying them. Or if we're talking about people, for example, right, you feel like you're betraying those people even if they're not exactly too good to you. And I feel like applying this philosophy of thanking something or someone for being in your life, for the amount of time that they were in your life, and for having that kind of connection, and for being there for you in the time where you needed them and they needed you perhaps, but also understanding that that time is gone and letting go is quite important in my opinion. And I feel like it's a very good way to look at things. So this book, probably for some of you who first heard me say the name, and then heard me describe what I feel like you could take away from it, it felt like a completely different book. But that's kind of my take on it, above the, on top of tidying up your house. So I thought that this was the very interesting stuff that this book gave me personally. So these are the 3 self-development books that I wanted to talk about and that I think are definitely worth reading. I'm sure there are other self-development books that are really good, and I'm sure you can find them. And if you do know some of them, let me know in the comments below, because I would love to get some very good, self-development book recommendations. But these are the ones that I really loved, and these are the ones that I think are actually really good and are worth reading. And yeah, if you enjoyed listening to me talking about these books, subscribe to the podcast, and don't forget to, listen to my next episode or to episodes before. All the links to my personal social media or to places where you can find this podcast on different platforms are in the description of this episode. And yeah, if you have any recommendation for things that you want me to talk about, or perhaps any other book genres, because I'm a huge bookworm and I love reading books and I love talking about books, let me know in the comments yet again, or send me a voice message on Anchor, as well as if you have any questions. And I will see you next week in my next podcast episode. Thank you so much for listening. Have a nice day. Goodbye.